Jackie, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the Q&As.
Thank you so much for that. I love listening to you. It gives me so many ideas. I do want to start with a few questions. We've gotten a couple already from folks. What do you think is the most important consideration when writing a memoir?
Honesty. I don't even have to think about that. You have to be honest on so many different levels. You have to be honest as far as why you want to write it. And then you have to be honest with the details. And that's why research is so important. You want to make sure that you research the heck out of this, because we tend to embellish sometimes without even realizing it. So you want to know why you're writing, who you're writing for, and you want to know what you hope to accomplish by this. And then also, I think for people who are writing memoirs, you have to be honest with your reader about what's going on inside, not just the extraneous events that happen, but the turmoil that you're facing. Because writing a memoir is a very, very personal thing, unlike writing fiction or writing historical accounts about other people. You are exposing yourself to an audience that may take your heart differently. And you have to understand that they may not connect, or they may be angry with what you're sharing. But if you're going to write a good memoir, you have to be honest. You can't just tell somebody, oh, I was depressed. You have to tell them why. You have to let them know what happened in your heart, what happened in reality. And that's not always an easy thing to do. My hat is off to anybody who writes a memoir that deals with tragedy that they have gone through.
Is there a storyline or approach? You've got a lot of facts. Are there particular storylines or ways of organizing so that it flows well and it's not just a list of facts or a chronology, if you will?
Okay, there are different approaches to writing a memoir, which makes it very, very exciting. And then, of course, different reasons we do it. I think of Ulysses S. Grant. He never wanted to write his memoir, but after being a general and after being a president, through circumstances, he found himself destitute, sick, and he was going to leave his family without. So his friend Mark Twain told him, write. A little bit different than somebody else. He had so much to tell us historically about what he accomplished. So for him, he would be able to go through his own personal records as a general and follow through. Now, one of the things that we talked about was a chronological event. We are working with a very different audience now of readers than we had 20 and 30 years ago. Many of our readers are expectant of the boom impact to start off with. You know, let me know what happened and then fill in the details for me. I found this approach in Galen Miles' book, in her prologue. Oh my gosh, did it grasp you? She shared the main event of her story. Now somebody would say, oh, well, we already know, you know, the basis of the story if I read it. Well, you've got to read the story, because that's going to tell you the whys behind it, the relationships, the saga behind it. So you can do those flashbacks, you can do those omnipotent points of view. Now that I say that, you're going to look at what kind of point of view you want to write it from. So many memoirs are written from first person because you're telling your own story. And that's a good way of writing it. Some people will take more of the novel approach. And I think Ms. Miles' intention is to make her book into a novel in the future, which it certainly would be good. So her treatment of it as a novel would be different than what she presented in the book that we have now. So let me say that there is another way of doing this. Irma Bombeck. When I say that name, I would like to think that most of us know who she is. For me, she never came out with the ultimate memoir as people would envision, but her life lessons I love. She would say things like, oh gosh, if I had my life to live over again, I wouldn't eat so many brown bananas. Well, there's so much truth in that. We have to enjoy life as we go along. So you can tell your story without writing a typical memoir. I have a friend, oh my goodness, and I won't mention her name, but every month or so, she comes out with this cute little thing that's called There's Never a Dull Moment, or Something's Always Happening. And she takes the mundane and makes it exciting. You know, she's going to the store and she tells funny things that happen. That is a type of memoir in and of itself, but it's so entertaining and it's humorous. A memoir doesn't always have to be heart-wrenching, although those are the types that we generally gravitate to because we want to identify in our darkest moments and know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. So I'll try to recap it just a little bit. You can do it chronologically, starting from when your theme begins or when your life begins, depending on the approach you're taking. You can also take it from a flashback, where you start with a flashback, which is the main, quote, theme or the emotion that you are bearing to your audience. Or you can also take it from a point of view that there are fun lessons to learn from life. Another point is, and I'll just say this very quickly, is write a book of fiction. You're saying, how can you do a memoir with a book of fiction? Well, for me, Mia Ripples in the Water, it's not really about me, but it's about those wolves, lambs, and honeybees that came into my life. And so I've got it packed full of information of the people who taught me lessons in life. And so that's kind of my memoir that's disguised as a mouse. But how you write it is going to depend a lot on your personality and the type of audience that you are reaching for. If it's family, then you could probably take that smoother, slower, more methodical, descriptive pace. But if you're looking for a wider audience, you may want to think about uploading some drama at the beginning.
What's the key to making dialogue believable?
It has to flow naturally. It has to flow naturally. And in writing, sometimes you will find that people have pages and pages of nothing but dialogue. And it can work. But I think to make dialogue very natural, you have to be an eavesdropper. You know, when we're talking, we're not necessarily listening to what we're saying. But one thing I love to do is to go into crowded places and just listen how people talk. For the most part, we talk with contractions. We don't say, I do not. You say, I don't. And also pepper into the dialogue a little visual of what that person is doing at the time. Like Debbie was talking for this memoir, and you might want to quote me and say, oh, and her hands were flipping all over the place and her head was tilting back and forth. Give the reader a little something to visualize, to put a little frame around the words that are being said. A lot of people also like to write in dialect. Dialect can be effective, but you must be very, very careful, because if you make the dialect too precise, your reader may not understand the dialect, and they spend too much time trying to understand the nuances in what's being said. So sometimes you're safer just to say, Debbie spoke with a Southern drawl, and then just let it say, Noon's air was fat with humidity, instead of saying, Noon's air was fat with humidity. You don't want to do that necessarily in the written word. If you're going to read your book to somebody, then you can. But my main advice in that area is just be a little intruder of other people's conversations and just see how it flows between them. Now, I will tell you that when you're writing a book, we never quite write the way that we talk. Because when we talk, we use a lot of ums and does, and you don't want to fill the writer or the reader up with dialogue that's not pertinent to your story. You want to make sure that dialogue is pertinent to your story, that it adds relevance, that it helps move the character, it helps move the story, because that's why they're there, to find out what your story is.
With storytelling, how do you judge the interest and the actual engagement of your audience?
With storytelling, it's so much easier when you are in person and live. You really don't know how you're reaching an audience when you are putting your book out there, unless you have readers that respond and say, oh, I like this, this worked for me, or I didn't like this. You know, you have to kind of gauge it. And that's one reason that you may want to have a select group of people read your work before you have it published. Once again, I'll make another plug for writers groups. Writers groups have a common theme. They want to improve their writings. They want to put it out there for others. And you have to have a hard skin if you're a writer. You have to understand that not everybody will love what you write. And you also have to understand that you are the master of your words. So you can get the feedback, you can hear what people have to say, but at the end, you decide where the period goes. You decide what that sentence says. And because that's your name that's going to be on that book. So having a testing group give you feedback is so important. Now, if I may say, do not ask your mother, do not ask your father, or somebody who is too close to you to read your book for content, because no matter what you write, they're going to love it. They're going to say, oh, this is great, but that's because they love you. Get together with some people that may not have that vested interest in you, but who you can trust and who are honest with their feedback. Not critically hurtful, but just honest with their feedback.
I had a couple of questions about the mechanics. You talked about using recording devices.
Yes.
Do you think it's okay to use something like the dictate feature on Microsoft Word, or Dragon, or one of those other packages that sort of takes dictation, especially when if you're somebody who's not really good at just the physical act of writing, putting stuff onto paper?
Absolutely, Jackie. In this world of technology, we should take advantage of every tool that is available to us. Now, Dragon will work for some people, but it doesn't work for other people. And you have to remember, if you've ever sent a voice email message before, you need to proofread, because it will not always cover the message the way that you think you're giving a message. But by all means, use what works for you. There are many people who don't know how to type. So writing a book, whether it be a memoir or a children's illustrated book, whatever, it's just so daunting because they don't type. And these are tools that we can use. Another tool that I would recommend, and I have no stock in it, is Grammarly. Grammarly will help you. Now, once again, you cannot take their recommendations 100%. You have to read it for yourself and see what really makes sense. And I'm going to make a plug for another online service, and that is Rhyme Zone. No stock in that, but I use it faithfully. I think the name of it is a little misleading, and some of you may say, I'm not writing poetry, I don't want to look at Rhyme Zone. Oh, it's much more than that. It gives you synonyms, antonyms, definitions. You can type in phrases, and it will tell you what book it's from, who wrote the book. Oh, these, of course, are the most famous books. But it is so helpful when you're writing. So yes, use all those tools that are out there.
We've had a question. Can you, again, give us the names of the books and the authors of the books, the 4 books that you talked about today?
Oh, I would be more than happy to.
Didn't get that.
Of course, of course. I will start off, I'll take them backwards. This is called Memories, and it's written by the Avondale residents, remember, World War II, and there's 2 parts to it. If you are interested, though I hope you don't mind, please contact Avondale, ask for Bill Hassler, and he will make sure that you get it. I believe this runs $10, but it's well worth it. every penny. And one thing that readers are going to love is that there's photographs in here, and there are photographs of people, photographs of ration cards. It just makes history come alive for you. And the folks at Avondale just have tons of amazing stories to share. So that's one of them. This one is Tragedy on the Susquehanna, and it's 1968. It's Galen, Gailen, Ray, Rae, Miles, Miles. Now, I got this from a bookstore in Bel Air. I'm going to guess that you can get it through Barnes & Noble, but if anybody should have difficulty finding any of these, contact me, and I will make sure that I set you up with who you can get it from. This book, Far from the Tree, by Pat Higgins Adelhart, is also available on Amazon, and it's quite a fun read, and it's also enlightening and encouraging. Under the Color of Law, and this one is by Dwight Pettit, is also available on Amazon. Can you see it without a glare? Here we go. All right.
I would like to encourage the authors of those books, if they haven't already done so, to consider donating a copy to the Historical Society. We have a library, and obviously we specialize in books by and about the people who live in Harford County. And each of those, I think, would qualify.
I think so.
Can you help us, if I want to find a writers group, what's a good writers group to join? How do I find it? If I don't, how can I start one of my own?
Okay, well, I will share that information. I'm a member of the Harford Writers Group, and it is a very good group. Right now we're meeting via Zoom, and it is led by Karen Harrison. And all you have to do is go on the web, and you can find information about it. We also have our own website that is handled by Katie Sank. It is a group of dedicated people. That is one option. Now, I'm going to tell you another option by giving you some historical information on this group. This group was started by a group of students who attended a writing class at Harford Community College. And they had enough interest and enough drive to form their group, which has lasted years now. And that is one of the best things that I would recommend, is to join a current writers group or to go to a class or a seminar and make connections. Because there you can kind of see the people who have like passions that you do, and you can form your group and just keep in touch. We meet once a month. People submit their pieces for evaluation and critiques, but those are the two of the best ways to do it. Either look online for existing groups or form your own group from attendances at seminars or classes, things like that.
Okay, I will encourage folks who are watching to go ahead and add your questions either in the chat or using the Q&A feature. Also at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you hover over that. In the meantime, I do want to talk a little bit about a program that the Historical Society is starting. And maybe you can help us, Debbie, think about how folks might get started in doing this. The Historical Society's plan to compile an anthology of local memoirs for publication as part of the Harford 250th anniversary celebration, which is in 2023. For those of you who don't know, that will be the 250th anniversary of the founding of Harford County. We will be accepting submissions from current and former county residents. We'd like for them to be double spaced. We're looking for short ones, no more than 2,000 words, and certainly we'll accept submissions that are shorter. You'll be able to submit those through the Historical Society. I'll give you a bit of information, more information at the end on how to do that. And then a committee made up of 3 members of the Harford 250th Anniversary Committee will choose which submissions get included in this final memoir document. So that's what the Historical Society is hoping to do. And I think the current pandemic, for folks who aren't sure what else to write, writing about your own experience and your own memories during 2020, I think will be something that's very valuable and will be useful to folks 50 or 75 or 100 years from now. Debbie, do you want to talk
Jackie,
a little bit about that?
I would like to add something. One of the members of the Historical Society, Carol Dybel, and I have been talking because we are so excited about your project. And you know Carol, she is
It's
so
Carol's project.
okay, good. Well, Carol's project. And we have made arrangements with Harford Community College to offer a memoir mini, probably in the fall. Now, the thing that you have to understand, I'm going to tell you straight up, you do not, by any stretch of the imagination, need to be in this class to be considered for this wonderful anthology. It's just for people who they want to say, yeah, I'd like to do it, but I don't know how to get started and I don't have anybody to help me. Well, we're looking at this fall doing 3 classes, 1 hour each, to just help you along the way. Each class is going to be focused on a different subject. For instance, people, places, and events. Those are generally the 3 things that you would be writing about for this memoir. So if you think you need a little kickstart, just feel free to join us in the fall, but that's, down the road. And like I said, you don't get any advantage to be selected by attending the class. It's just something you might want to consider.
And when you say the fall, you mean
yes,
the fall of 2021?
Yes, the fall of 2021. Yes, yes. And that may seem far away to people, but what they should start doing is, we're planting seeds today. So you start writing your little stories and get them ready. And then that way, your time in this memoir class, if you decide to join it, hopefully will be more important because we will be able to work with something you already have.
Carol, I see that you've been added as a panelist. Is there anything you wanted to add?
I think one of the things that I found is most people don't realize that their stories are part of history and they need to be able to share those for people in the future. And so what I see this project doing is telling us the story of Harford County. And every one of us has had so many different experiences in life in Harford County with the people, with the places, and the events. And so your story is really important. And I really encourage people to do this, to tell your friends about it. I think it's going to be a wonderful project.
So the time frame for this, we'll begin accepting submissions in January of 2021, and it would go through the end of 2021 is our current thought process in terms of the mechanics of it. So anytime in 2021. Chris Potts, you've also joined us. Is there anything you wanted to add? For those who aren't familiar with her, Chris does a lot, is a writer herself and does a lot of editing of publications for the Historical Society. Chris,
I would just say that I think this sounds like an incredibly exciting project and agree with Carol that the more people we have contributing to a recording of history, the more exciting it will be for future generations.
And if you're not ready to start writing your memoir, consider at least keeping a diary, particularly through this year. But I will tell you that in an earlier talk, we had which was on the Civil War in Harford County, we had the benefit of a diary written by a Mrs. Gibson during the Civil War. Mrs. Gibson, who was just writing her diary, had no idea that 150 years later, it would provide a really important thread for understanding individual people's experience of the Civil War in our jurisdiction and would end up being sort of the bedrock of a presentation that we gave. That was given by one of our Civil War historians. So consider writing these things down, consider contributing things to our permanent collection, because truly they may be useful far beyond your imaginings or mine. I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up. We did have one more question for you, Debbie. Somebody asked, my siblings have often have memories of a particular event that differ greatly from how I recall it. I think they're not the only person who has that experience.
Yes.
How do I tell my story without antagonizing my siblings?
Well, that may not be an option. Now, what they may want to do is they may want to tell their version of events, but also include their siblings' version of the events in their memoir. And that way, everybody's recollection is covered. Because it is so true. It is like people witnessing an accident. People see different things. They feel different things. They hear different things, depending on where they are. Are there any obstructions in their vision to witnessing what has happened? Just because they all remember things differently doesn't mean that anybody's wrong. It just means that they're different. And so my recommendation would be to, when possible, give them a voice in your memoir. And that leads me to something that somebody asked me the other day is, do people embellish their memoirs? And the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. And there's different levels of embellishment. Some are out of necessity. We don't remember everything. So in order to paint a picture of a story, sometimes we have to, through our research, determine what may have happened. Another thing that a lot of people do in their memoirs is include dialogue. Well, unless you have a photographic memory, you don't remember the dialogue. So sometimes we have to embellish with the dialogue, and you just base that dialogue on your research and your recollections of these people that is in fact to the best recollection based on what's available to you. Now on the far scale, you have people that will embellish because they want to sell books. And that's their main goal. And so they make villains more villainous. They make good people better than they were. And they sprinkle in some salt and pepper just to spice it up. So yeah, there is embellishment that goes on. Now, Jackie, if we don't have any more questions, may I have one more moment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. It was mentioned to me the other day that sometimes you know somebody that would be a good author of their own story, but may not be a willing author of their own story. I hope what happens today, and most of the people in our audience are interested, but I hope that we're all thinking about people that we have talked with, maybe grandparents, parents, aunts or uncles, friends. They tell tremendous stories. They have so much to tell. But if you ask them, write something, they'll say, no, I won't, no. So I've come up with a few things that you may want to do. First of all, invite them out for coffee. Or if you really want to soften them up, invite them out for lunch or dinner. Start talking about the stories that you remember that make you believe this person has something to share with other people. Talk about old movies, old songs, and look through yearbooks and photo albums together if you can. Now, once you've got them kneaded and softened up a little bit, let them know how much their stories mean to you, what difference it makes in your life, and how you feel like it could impact other people just as well. And then offer them a lifeline. Tell them that if they're willing, you will help them. And if they agree, set up another meeting. And then meet where they are comfortable. Maybe in their house, in their favorite chair, or maybe at a favorite park, a favorite restaurant. And take with you prepared questions to help guide the discussion. And then also ask them if you can record it. Because if they're not watching you write and they're just flowing with it, the stories may come more readily. And allow those recollections to flow. And then once you've finished, you go home, you go over everything that was said or recorded, and then you come up with more questions because you want them to fill in the blanks for you later on. And then just guide them through it, help them through it, and just remind them that they have a story to tell that will be of interest to other people. So I hope that helps that person that was curious about that.
Okay. Bill, if you'll put up the last slide. We certainly hope that you have enjoyed this afternoon's presentation as much as I have, in fact. And we hope you're looking forward to looking back over your own life. And we do want to let you know that you can purchase several of Ms. Jennings' books through the bookstore on the Society's website. They will make great Christmas and birthday gifts. We've talked a bit about our plan to compile an anthology of local memoirs for publication. Submissions should be sent to the Historical Society of Harford County in care of Carol Dybel, 143 North Main Street, Bel Air, 21014, or you can email them directly to Carol, C-A-R-O-L, Dybel, D-E-I-B-E-L, at verizon.net. Submissions will be accepted from current and former county residents. They should be double-spaced with no more than 2,000 words. Shorter works will certainly be accepted. We encourage you to include photographs. The stories should be specifically related to an event, person, or place in Harford County. All submissions will be retained in our archives permanently. A committee made up of 3 members of the Harford 250 Anniversary Committee will choose which submissions to include in the final document. And as I said earlier, the deadline for submission is December 31st, 2021. We encourage you to visit our website to learn more about the history of Harford County and to consider joining the Historical Society of Harford County. A gift membership may be the perfect present for someone this holiday season. Our web address is www.harfordhistory.org. Thank you, and please join us for future events. You can find a list of our events on the website. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.